Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another day of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Sarah. I'm one of the educators here at the Aquarium of the Pacific, and I'm so excited that you have joined us for Whale Wednesday. Happy Whale Wednesday, everyone. Now, you might be wondering why I'm calling it Whale Wednesday. Well, first, we're going to talk all about whales today. But actually, here in the office at the Aquarium of the Pacific, we have started celebrating Whale Wednesday. It happened maybe a couple months into the pandemic, and our aquarium actually sells a whale mask, and a bunch of us bought that mask and happened to wear it all on the same day, and it happened to be Wednesday, so we like to celebrate Whale Wednesday. And I'm so glad you're joining us because we are actually going to go on a whale watch today. Now, if you ever get a chance to go out on the open ocean on a whale watch, I highly recommend it. We have boats that leave from our aquarium here in Long Beach. There are boats in Redondo Beach, there are boats in Newport and Dana Point, and all across the country, all along the coast, there are whale watch boats that go out. And if you have the chance to go whale watching, I highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite things that we get to do here at the aquarium. But you may not have access to that, and that's totally okay because we are going to take you on a whale watch today. Now, while we're going on this whale watch, if you have any questions that you want to ask about the animals we are looking for or we're talking about, if you have any observations, or if you spot an animal that we don't see yet, we would love to hear from you. Now, I'm not alone. I have Captain Cynthia, and she's going to be controlling the boat and everything you see behind me. And she just put this number. So if you'd like to share anything you see, any questions, any observations, we would love to hear from you. You can text us at 562-286-1838. Now, if you are watching live, so it is 9 a.m. on February 16th, you can go ahead and text us. If you're watching after the fact, we would still love to hear from you, but we just ask that you email us. And that email address is just below that phone number. It's live@lbaop.org. All right, explorers, are you ready to go? Are you ready to set sail? That's what I was trying to say. Are you ready to get on our boat and go looking for some whales? Excellent. Now, before we go, I want you to take a moment and think, if you were going to go on a real whale watch, if you were going to leave your house right now and go onto a boat, what kinds of things would you take with you? Because there are some things, some tools, or some things we might want to take with us when we're going whale watching. So what do you think you would take with you? Ooh, Cynthia said food, and I agree. Snacks are key. Now, they're important because I'm always hungry, and we always love snacking. But sometimes people might get seasick when the ocean's a little rocky, and snacks can help with that. My favorite snacks on a whale watch, I used to bring those peanut butter Ritz crackers, the little sandwich ones, or goldfish. Captain Cynthia, what was your favorite snack on a whale watch? Ooh, pretzels and guacamole were Captain Cynthia's favorite whale watch snack. So we need snacks. What else might you bring? Now, the boat is always moving. And if we were going out right now in the winter, it's going to be really chilly. So I like to bring lots of layers. I always bring a sweatshirt and then maybe a vest and then a jacket on top of that. So lots of layers so that if you get warmer, you can take some off. But if it gets really chilly, especially when you're moving and the wind is blowing in your face, you can put on a couple more layers. Even a beanie is good too, especially when it's cold. All right, so we've got extra clothes, layers, jackets. We've got snacks. Are there any tools you might want to bring with you? What about binoculars? Do you think those would be useful? Absolutely. So when we're on a whale watch boat, our captain and crew, they do a really good job looking for these animals and spotting them. But it's always fun for us and helpful if we're looking for these animals too. So you can bring binoculars and you can help scan the water looking for some animals. So binoculars are good. Those are some good things. I think that's a good place to start. Now, I said that you can help us look for these animals. Now, when you're on the boat, you may have never seen some of the animals we're going to see before, so you might not know what you're looking for. Now, when we go on the boat, we tell our guests that there are 3 things you're going to look for when you're trying to spot a whale or a dolphin or even a seal or a sea lion, which are some of the most common animals for us to see. So the first thing you want to look for is splashing. Now, that's a lot of splashing. Now, a lot of times when we go on the boat, we see maybe a little bit of splash, and that's one little wave. But if you see splashing over and over and over and over again, a lot of splashing all over the place, that could be a sign that we are looking at dolphins. So that's what we call the first key indicator. The first thing we want to look for is splashing, because if we see splashing, it's a good chance we're looking at dolphins. Now, the second thing we want to look for, and you can just use your eyes or your binoculars, but your eyes work just as well if you don't have binoculars. The second thing you're going to look for is bird activity. So there are a lot of birds who make their home on the ocean, and they feed on things that live in the water, like little fish or squid or shrimp. And so if these birds are diving down and they're eating off the water, that means there's a lot of food there. And if there's a lot of food in a certain place, there's a good chance there are other animals besides that food and besides birds, like dolphins or whales or seals or sea lions. So the second indicator you want to look for is bird activity. So we've got waves or splashing, bird activity. And the third thing you want to look for is the blow or spout from a whale. Now I think Captain Cynthia can bring up a picture of a blow from a whale so we can see what it looks like. Here we go. So this right here is what the blow or the spout of a whale looks like. So whales, they're mammals like you and me. Now everyone take a deep breath. It feels really nice to help us relax. We took a breath in through our nose, and that air filled our lungs. And whales, because they're mammals like us, do the same thing. Now their nose is a little different. It's kind of like on the top of their head. That's this bump right here. That's called their blowhole. It's basically their nose. And what happens is a whale is going to hold their breath. They're going to dive down, swim around, maybe eat some food. And then once they can't hold their breath any longer, they're going to come to the surface. And their blowhole is kind of like a cup, almost looks like this. So when they come to the surface, a little bit of water gets caught in that cup. And then they're going to open their nostrils and they're going to exhale. You can exhale really loud. And that's the same thing the whale does. They're exhaling all that breath. But because there is a little bit of water that got caught in their nostrils, when they exhale, that air inside their lungs is really warm and that water is really cold. And when those two mix, it causes that water to evaporate and it looks just like this. So it's not sending water straight up into the air. It's tiny little droplets of water that kind of turn into mist. And we call it the blow or the spout. Now, depending on the type of whale, this blow or spout can be about 20 to 30 feet tall. I know. That's huge. Now, it's hard to tell, but I'm only 5 feet too. So that is way, way, way taller than me. And because it's so tall, that blow or spout, you can actually see it from really far away, even without binoculars. And the other cool thing about this spout is the shape of it is different for every type of whale. So for animals like this blue whale right here, it tends to be more straight up because they're so big and they've got so much air in their lungs, they just send that water straight up into the air. For a whale like a gray whale, it's going to be more of a heart shape, and that's because of the way that their nostrils are shaped. And then for a whale like a humpback, we call it more of a spade, so it's a little bit wider. So it just depends on the type of whale, how big their blow is. But that's the third thing we're going to look for, is we're going to look for the blow or spout of a whale. All right, explorers, you got that? So we're going to keep an eye on the water, looking for splashing, looking for bird activity, and looking for the blow or spout of a whale to try and find some animals while we're out here on the water whale watching. All right, now I'm going to leave it up to Captain Cynthia. She's going to take us wherever she thinks there's going to be lots of whales for us to see. And let's see if we can spot anything. So if you have your binoculars, you can make your hands into binoculars. And we're going to scan the water, see what we can find. You know what? We use little clues. Like I know that Captain Cynthia spotted something because look, we're moving faster. So I bet she saw something really far in the distance. She probably has better binoculars than we do. And I wonder what it... Look at this. Look at these whales. Oh my goodness. This is our first whale spotting, and this is a very special spot for us to see today. Look at these beautiful whales. There's a couple of them too. How many do we see? There's at least 1, 2. I think there are more. Let's see if we'll see them again. Now, sometimes we kind of have to turn the boat around a couple times to see these whales. And there are some laws in place. So we can obviously whale watch. We can see these whales. But we have to stop a certain distance from them in order to make sure that they feel comfortable and that they're protected. Oh, look, I think there's 5. Oh, my goodness. So many whales. Now, these whales, like I said, they're very special. These whales have a very special story. These are gray whales. Now, their name might seem pretty obvious because they're pretty much of a gray color, but gray whales are a special animal. I said they have a special story because these animals have one of the longest migrations of any mammal. Now, that word migration is a big word, but what it means is an animal or even a person moving from one place to another. And our gray whales, they migrate from Alaska all the way down to Mexico and back. Now, if you think about a map, even if we don't have a picture, if you think about a map, us here in California, it's like right here. Above us is Oregon, Washington, and then Alaska's all the way to the top. And then if we think below California is Mexico. And so these gray whales, they spend a lot of time in Alaska. Now, the reason they're in Alaska, you might think, oh, it's so cold in Alaska. But in the summertime in Alaska, there's a lot of sunlight. It's sunny for most of the day, way more than we have here in California. So when there's a lot of sun, that shines on the ocean, and it helps all the little plants and algae growing in the ocean. And when there's lots of little plants and algae growing in the ocean, it feeds a lot of animals. And these gray whales, they eat something called amphipods, which are like little bugs or little crustaceans that live in the mud. Now, when there's a lot of sunlight, there's a lot of algae, and a lot of algae feeds all these amphipods, which means there's a lot of food for these animals to eat. So they spend most of their time where there's a lot of food. But while there's a lot of sun in the summer in Alaska, as it gets to winter, there's not a lot of sun, way less sun than we have here in California. And so as it gets to about October, and there starts to be less sunlight, which means there's less food for these whales, it kind of sends a signal to them that it's time for them to migrate, to move to warmer waters. So every October, they leave Alaska and they head down to Mexico. And they use the coastline. Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness, we just saw a breaching gray whale. Did you see that? Now what that means is gray whales, they will send their whole body up out of the water and kind of like jump out of the water. So we see gray whales do it, we see a couple other whales do it, but it's pretty exciting to see them do that. So these gray whales we're seeing, they are on their yearly migration. So what happens is they leave Alaska, they head down to Mexico, and they use the coastline as a way to help them navigate. So that means they're going to pass by Washington. Ooh, look at this one underwater. Isn't that cool? We can put cameras in the water to record them. So they're going to pass Washington. They're going to pass Oregon. They're going to come down California so we can see them. And then they're going to head to Mexico. Now in Mexico, there's some lagoons there. And that means it's kind of protected. It's not in the open ocean. And the waters are nice and calm. And they're nice and warm. And so gray whales will give birth there. Or they'll breed. And then once they've done that, then they'll head back up to Alaska. And then they'll make it back to Alaska when it's about time for the summer, and there's more food for them to feed, and the whole cycle starts all over again. Now, I did say that they're making their way down to Mexico to breed and give birth, but all gray whales are going to make this migration, even if they're not ready to breed or give birth, or even if they're a male. So all gray whales, once it starts to be October and there's less sunlight, it's a signal everyone is going to start making their way down and then making their way back up, which is why sometimes we'll see them in groups. Now, these are a type of whale called baleen whales. Now, baleen whales, that refers to what is in their mouth, which is perfect because we just saw this whale feeding. Now, I know it looks like it kind of just spit mud out of its mouth, which seems like why in the world would they do that? But that is the way that they feed. So gray whales, as a baleen whale, they have these plates, these keratin plates that hang from their upper jaw. And I actually have a piece of gray whale baleen I can show you on my special document camera. So this right here is baleen. I'm going to zoom out first so you can see. This is just one plate, and this is from a gray whale. So these baleen plates, this is one plate, and then there'd be another one stacked next to it, and then another one next to it, and they have a ton of these plates. And they hang from their upper jaw. The scientific name for baleen whales is mysticeti, or mysticetes, and that means mustache. It's kind of like a giant mustache on the upper part of their mouth. And then this part is what you would see on the outside. And then if we turn it inside, these bristles, this is on the inside. Now I'm going to zoom in so we can see these bristles a little bit better. So these bristles are what are on the inside. Now Cynthia had a great picture up of our gray whale with its mouth open. So you can see these plates right here. So you can almost count how many plates are there. And that's that kind of rounded edge we were looking at. But if we were on the inside, it would look like that brush. So the way that these whales eat, gray whales, blue whales, fin whales, humpback whales, there's a bunch of baleen whales, is they take in a lot of water. Here's a good picture. They take in a lot of water, and in the water are the tiny animals they eat. Now I mentioned for gray whales, it's something called amphipods, and they actually are feeding on muddy water. So the gray whale will dive down, and they actually choose a side. So we can tell gray whales are kind of left or right. I won't say handed because they don't have hands, but they choose a left or right side, and they dive down, they turn to the side, they dig their lower jaw into the mud. It kicks up all that muddy water, and inside that muddy water is their food. And then they put it into their mouth. I won't say they swallow it because they're going to take a big gulp, but then they're going to use their tongue, as you can see here. This is their tongue. And they're going to push all that water out through those baleen plates. And that bristly part is going to catch all the food. So you can see here between this gray part right here, that's the baleen. This pink thing is the tongue. And those tiny little orange dots, that's the food. So they'll push the water out, and the food will get caught on those baleen plates. So if we go back to that picture of that little gray whale, these are what they're going to use to filter out the food. And that video we watched before, we can watch that video again where they had that mud coming out. They're filtering out the mud and catching all the little amphipods, all those tiny little crustaceans that live in the mud. They're getting all those stuck on their baleen plates, but they're pushing the water out. So we're going to see them spit out all that muddy water. Gross. It's gross and cool, I think. And then they're going to be able to eat. Now, something interesting about this video here, this was taken here in our harbor. Now, it's pretty rare to see whales in the harbor because harbors are protected areas. So the way that our setup here at the right outside of our aquarium is we've got this harbor, which is right along where there's boats docked and there's storefronts. And then once you kind of go towards to leave the harbor, there's a break wall, which is a big rock wall that goes down to the ocean floor. So it's 30 to 40 feet deep. Now, what that does is it protects the coastline. So it protects all those boats and businesses. So if there's big waves crashing, it's going to crash on that rock wall, and the water inside along the harbor is going to be really calm. So we don't often see whales there because the water is shallow, because there's a lot of movement, a lot of people and boat activity, and there's not a lot of food there. But every so often, we will see some animals come into our harbor, like these gray whales. So every so often, we see these gray whales come into the harbor to feed. Now, another reason that's interesting is because usually on their migration, as they're making their way from Alaska to Mexico, they're not feeding because their main goal is to get down to Mexico and make it back up. But we have recorded here in Southern California for a couple years now, gray whales stopping to feed in our harbor. Now, one more thing I'll say about the gray whales before we move on is we mentioned that their name is gray because they're a gray whale, and you can kind of see a little bit of gray, but there's a lot of other things hanging out on this whale's body. Now, gray whales are known for having two sort of hitchhikers, two little critters that live on their back. One are barnacles. Now, barnacles are a common animal that we will find along the tide pools. They kind of look like a little rock volcano, and the way that they feed is they have these little feather appendages. They stick out and they catch little tiny things floating in the water, and then they pull it back down into their body to eat. Now, gray whales have barnacles on their body, but it's what we call a species-specific barnacle, meaning it's only found on gray whales. And the barnacle is like, this animal is going to be slow-moving. It's going to travel a lot. It's probably going to go through a lot of area with a lot of food, so I'm going to live on the gray whale. And then we also find whale lice. Now, that might sound kind of gross to us humans because lice is a really bad thing for us to have. But the type of lice that we find on gray whales is actually a good kind of lice because it helps clean off the whale's body. So they have some dead skin cells, some old skin, maybe some parts of the barnacle that they don't really want on their body anymore. And the lice will eat around and help clean up the whale. And down in Mexico in the lagoons, you can actually see the mothers passing lice onto their babies because it's so good for them to have. I know that sounds wild for us to think about, but they actually see that happening. Pretty cool. Now, I spent a lot of time talking about these gray whales just because we are in the middle of their migration right now. So we're still seeing a couple couple southbound, so going down to Mexico, but we're also seeing a lot of northbound gray, so heading back up to Alaska right here along our coast. So it's a great time to go on a boat and see these whales. But you know what? Let's head out and see if Captain Cynthia has any other animals for us to find today. We'll say goodbye to the gray whales, back on the water. So pleasant. That's the nice thing is being on the water for me is such a nice thing. Whether it's during the day, in the evenings, we get really beautiful sunsets here. And I just find it very calming looking at the water like this. So calming. Ooh, but did you notice? We're speeding up a little. And even faster. I wonder, did you all spot anything? Remember, you can text us. If you see any animal in the water, go ahead and text us at 562-286-1838. And let's see if you spotted the same thing that Captain Cynthia's found. Look at this! We found some dolphins! How fun. Now, dolphins are probably one of the most fun things for us to see because they're pretty active. Look how pretty these dolphins are. Now, this is called a Pacific white-sided dolphin, and this is a treat because we don't see them here all the time. So just like the grays, they're here in certain seasons, our Pacific white-sided dolphins are usually here in the winter months as well. So there are some dolphins we call our resident species, which we'll see all the time. They don't really have a major migration. They might move up and down our coastline to shallow and deeper waters looking for food, but they generally stay in the same place. But some animals like the grays or like our Pacific white-sided dolphins, they visit us in the winter months, and they're so pretty looking to see these dolphins. Now, they might look a little bit different than you might think of an image of a dolphin when you think about dolphins, but they're really cool. Now, there's a handful of dolphins that we might see on the boat, and there's a couple ways that we can figure out which type of dolphin it is that we're looking at. Because when you're on the boat and we're moving and the dolphins are moving, they're moving pretty fast. But it's important that we know what animal we're looking at. So for these Pacific white-sided dolphins, we look for the color on their body. We also look at their nose. So take a look at this nose, their rostrum. It's a little bit different than some of the other dolphins we see where they don't really have that sort of front part of their face, right? It just kind of slopes down and then curves under. So their face is very different. And then they've got this dorsal fin. Now this dorsal fin is a really important part, or a really easy thing for us to find to help us understand or to figure out what kind of dolphin or what kind of animal we're looking at. So this dorsal fin, this helps these animals with balance. So we know that the bigger the dorsal fin, the faster moving that these animals are going to go. Now we didn't even really see it, but gray whales, they basically don't even have a dorsal fin. They've got these little knuckles along their back, but no dorsal fin. And that tells us, if you know nothing else about gray whales, the fact that they have no dorsal fin will tell you they move pretty slow. They don't pick up speed too much because they don't have a dorsal fin. But Pacific white-sided dolphins are a little bit smaller of a dolphin. They're only about 6 to 7 feet long, but they have a huge dorsal fin. And so that tells us that they are going to be very speedy animals. And their dorsal fin has 2 colors on it, which I think is really cool. Some of the other dolphin species we see have different colors on their body, but their dorsal fin is just one color. But our Pacific white-sided dolphins have a white and gray dorsal fin. Pretty cool, right? Let's see some other pictures of dolphins we might see here along our coast. Ah, interesting. So as Captain Cynthia pointed out, this one looks very similar, but this is a different type of dolphin. Now, these 2 dolphins are fairly the same size, but this is what we call a common dolphin. And as their name implies, they are very common to our coastline. Here in Southern California, we have one of, if not the largest concentration or the largest population of common dolphins found anywhere in the world. And we've got some more pictures. And we see them pretty regularly because they are one of our resident species. They don't really have a migration. They don't leave. They're pretty much found here all the time. Now, the way that I identify common dolphins when we're seeing them is, one, we usually see them in very large pods. Now, a pod is a group of dolphins. And the way we estimate the size of a pod is we assume for every dolphin we see at the surface, there's 2 to 3 below. So if we were looking at this picture and we can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 dolphins, we would multiply that by like 3, meaning there's 20, 30, even more dolphins below them. So common dolphins are found in very large pods, and it just depends on the type of dolphin or whale, how big that pod's going to be. So for common dolphins, it's common for us to see 1, 2, 300, all the way up to 1,000 or more in one single pod. Now, if we see 1,000, we'll call that a super pod because there's just so many dolphins. So we often see them in larger pods. Now, another type of dolphin that we see here is called a bottlenose, and they tend to be in smaller pods. So we might only see, here's our bottlenose. So we might only see them if they're what we call our coastal bottlenose, 3 to 5 of them, or offshore, maybe 30, 40, but not in the same numbers as the common. And another way to tell the difference is the color. So take a look at these bottlenose dolphins. They're pretty much all gray. Now we can see they've got some scratches on their body, a little bit of different coloration, and that's from social interactions because dolphins are very social animals. But if we go back to that common dolphin, we can see they have a color change on their body. So whereas the bottlenose is solid gray, the common has this sort of dark gray on the top, cream color in the middle, and you can't see it, but the bottom, their belly, is all white. So dark on top, lighter in the middle, and even lighter on the belly. And with that bottlenose dolphin, we didn't see it, but it's gray body, but it's even lighter on the belly. But that is something common we see between all of our dolphins and a lot of our whales too, where they're dark on top and light on the bottom. Now that's actually really important. Ooh, look at this. What kind of dolphins are these? These are bottlenose, putting on a show. And what you can see here is here's the gray back and then the white belly. Now that's really important because that is something called counter shading. It's actually a form of camouflage. And camouflage is a tool or an adaptation, something on an animal's body that helps them to survive or stay safe. And so counter shading allows them to be protected. So if we're on the boat, right, and we're looking down at the water, it's going to look really dark. And that means the back of these animals, the dark back, is going to blend in and make it really hard for us to see them. And then if you're an animal swimming below the surface and you look up, like if we look up at lights in the room that we're in, it's going to look really bright. And so the belly of these animals can blend in. And so these animals are protected from the top and the bottom. Well, look at this big pot of commons. Now I see some questions came in. So we're going to keep watching this pot of commons as they kind of swim around our boat. And I'm going to answer these questions. Ooh, so one question is, oh, this is from Ms. Dominguez's class. So good morning, Ms. Dominguez's class. Thanks for joining us today. We love all your questions. So how long do whales live? Now that's a great question, but it really depends on the type of whale. So the blue whale, which is the largest whale, the largest animal on the planet, they can live about 80 to 90 years. So that's pretty similar to humans. But then smaller whales, so here's a picture of our blue whale. Smaller whales like orcas, they only live about 30 to 40, 45 years. This is an orca. And then for dolphins, it might be even a little bit less. It just depends on the species. So they have a pretty wide age range depending on what type of animal we are talking about. Ooh, and excellent. How fast do they swim? Again, that depends, and that also depends on that dorsal fin. So these common dolphins, they can pick up speeds. They can be pretty fast. Now, the fastest dolphin that we would see is that orca. So we'll bring up another picture of an orca. Excellent. This video is really cool because it's going to show that dorsal fin. Look how big that dorsal fin is. For male orcas, that dorsal fin can reach 6 feet tall, which is taller than I am. And that tells us that these animals are going to be very fast. And I think the orca can pick up speeds or have bursts of speeds about 30 miles an hour, which is probably that's about as fast as a lot of cars go in sort of when they're picking up speed going onto a freeway or in residential areas. We go a little bit less than that, but cars can move about 30 miles an hour. Imagine a whale swimming that fast too. Now, for animals like the gray whale, it's going to be a lot slower because they lack that dorsal fin. But dolphins, including the orca, tend to pick up speeds way more than some of the bigger baleen whales. How do they, or what do they eat? So for animals like the gray whale, they eat those amphipods. For animals like blue whales and humpbacks, they feed on krill, which are tiny shrimp. But then for animals like our dolphins, if we were to look in their mouth, they are a separate group of whales. So whales we break into two groups. The baleen whales, like those gray whales, blues, humpbacks, and then we have our toothed whales. Now what do you think are in the toothed whale's mouth? That's right, teeth. So dolphins, including our orcas, which is the largest type of dolphin, they have teeth in their mouth. And their teeth are all pointy. They don't have any flat teeth like us. And so they're going to be feeding on things like fish and squid. And they take a bite, and they hold on to that food, and then they swallow it whole. And what's really interesting is for dolphins, when they're eating fish, they try and angle it. They try and grab the head of the fish and have it go down their throat that way, so because there are spines in the fins, and so they don't want the fins to get caught in their throat. So they eat the head first and swallow. So fish and squid are the main food groups of our dolphins. Ooh, how much do they weigh? Again, that is going to depend on the type of whale. So for our dolphins, like our common or Pacific white-sided dolphins, it's going to be like a couple 100 pounds, maybe 400 or 500 pounds. But for our blue whale, it's going to be way more. And I am going to have Cynthia look up how much a blue whale weighs. Oh, got tongue-tied there. Because I don't want to give you a wrong answer, but I can tell you it is very heavy. So we will come back to that. And do they have any predators? That is a great question. So the predators, again, it depends on the type, but they definitely do have predators. Now, orcas are one of what we call an apex predator, which means they are the very top of their food chain. And they will feed on gray whales. They will actually feed on the gray whale calves as the gray whales are making their way back up to Alaska. So gray whales, they do have a predator, and their predator is an orca. Now, for animals like blue whales, which are the largest mammal, they don't have very many predators because they are so large. But for some of our smaller dolphins, they could be preyed upon by sharks or by other whales. Like orcas will also eat other dolphins as well. Now, for orcas, all right, we're going to see how much a blue whale weighs. So the largest is 330,000 pounds. That is a lot of zeros in that number for how big this animal weighs. And this animal, they can get about 100 feet long. So they are very massive. They are the largest animal on the planet, are blue whales. But they are beautiful and they're fascinating to see if you ever get a chance to see them in the ocean. Now, back to the predator question. So orcas are a predator for other whales and dolphins. Sharks can be predators as well. But the orca, as the apex predator, doesn't really have any predators except for the one predator that I would say orcas have are, not me, I would like to protect all the orcas. But humans are a predator to even animals that are an apex predator. And that's because orcas, they are susceptible to a lot of things like pollution in the ocean, which is caused by humans. A lot of boating in areas where orcas live can disrupt the orcas' habitat, can disrupt how they're living. Humans catching salmon, which is one of their main food groups when they live up in the Pacific Northwest, and so taking away their food supply. And so humans can be a predator or a threat to these animals. But in the ocean, orcas, as an apex predator, don't have to worry about any predators for them. But that's not true for all whales, just depends on the species. All right, everyone, we are about out of time. I hope you enjoyed going on our whale watch today. We got to see gray whales and on their fabulous, really long, super cool migration. We got to see a couple different types of dolphins, and we talked about those orcas as well. And now we have this beautiful sunset. So I hope you enjoyed whale watching with us today. Now, a couple things before we go. If you are class watching, like Ms. Dominguez's class, if you can send in the number of students you have watching, that just helps us better target these programs as we move forward with our Aquarium Online Academy. So that's one thing. And the second thing is if you want more programming, we have another program coming up later today, and Captain Cynthia is going to be teaching this program. It's going to be in Spanish, and it is, it's a mystery animal, so I don't even know what we're going to talk about. But if you'd like to help us solve the mystery, tune in at 10 a.m., and we'll see you then. Bye, everyone.